Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us this morning. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you may be joining us. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, everyone. We've got a wonderful group today, a great topic. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Thanks for joining us.
What do you want?
Morning, everyone. Or good afternoon, wherever you are joining us. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just a quick housekeeping item. If you're joining us, if you could mute yourself, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Well, welcome. We are going to get started today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Wendy Doyle, and I have the privilege of welcoming you today as President and CEO of United We. Welcome again and happy Women's History Month. So good to see you all. So a couple of housekeeping items. If you could mute yourself throughout the presentation, but no, you can unmute when we have conversation. And then feel free to drop any comments, questions throughout the presentation in the chat. Thank you for joining us for Step Into Your Power workshop. I especially want to express our appreciation for the United We trailblazers, change makers, and ambassadors in attendance today. Your investment of time, talent, and treasure truly fuels our work and is invaluable. We're joined today by two trailblazers. We're joined by Carolyn LUCE, one of America's most respected and accomplished voices on women as leaders and the relationship with power. She has long been an advocate for healthcare innovations, cultural inclusivity, and women's empowerment through her work with some of the world's most respected companies like Ernst & Young, Johnson & Johnson, Pfizer, and GE. A gifted strategist and executive coach, Carolyn has spent the last 4 decades of her career building highly effective cultures, businesses, teams, and leaders in both the public and private sectors. As some of you may know, we have an initiative called the Appointments Project, which is working to get women appointed to civic boards and commissions at the city, county, and state level. And I'm so pleased that Carolyn was appointed by New York City's Mayor Bloomberg to his commission on women's issues. She's also author of EPIC, the Women's Power Playbook, and creator of the Decade Game, which is helping women live the best decade of their lives. So welcome, Carolyn. Also joining us is a good friend to United We and a good friend to me, Laura Welch, who is a philanthropist, donor, and advocate of the Decade Game. For the past 40 years, Laura has been a philanthropist and volunteer. She has served on the board of more than 30 nonprofit organizations, including being a founding board member of the Jazz Aspen Snowmass, the Aspen Brain Institute, and the Midwest Innocence Project. Laura became president of the Welch Family Foundation in 1991. Her main areas of interest are social justice, the arts, integrative health programs, and exploration into applied consciousness practices. Laura will be joining us as part of the Q&A session later and sharing her personal experience living the Decade Game. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
Before we dive in, I'd like to share a little bit about United We and what brings us all together today. Our mission is to advance all women's economic and civic leadership. We do this by investing in research, policy solutions, and civic leadership to create systems changes that improve lives for all women and their families. Our key priorities are a range and include pay equity, paid family leave, childcare, entrepreneurship, and occupational licensing. Our vision is to end gender inequity once and for all. But we can't do this alone. And we rely on an extensive network of advocates, including donors, ambassadors, elected officials, appointees, corporate supporters, allies, and more. One thing all of these people have in common is the deep desire to empower others. Our session today is designed to help you become the most powerful version of yourself, so you can help lift others in the most effective and efficient way. So with that, I'd like to pass it over to Carolyn, who is going to walk us through EPIC. So Carolyn, take it away.
Thanks so much, Wendy and Laura and the whole team at United We. I'm just delighted to be able to spend some time with you, all of you who are so committed to create a world that works. So let's talk a little bit about EPIC. First of all, what I want you to know is I'm not using the word epic in what I consider the masculine construct, the adjective of bigger than, better than, greater than, thinner than, king of the hill, master of the universe. I'm using it in what I consider more of a relational feminine construct, because the original word, epic, a Greek word, meant a long form story of daring to do, and daring to be. You know, it's the epic of Homer, the epic of Ulysses. Except when we think about those epic long form stories of daring to do and daring to be, we tend to think of men. But this is Women's History Month. And we stand on the shoulders of so many women who have dared to do and dared to be. And even in our own lives, we are planting the seeds for people in the future to stand on our shoulders of daring to do and daring to be. Here's the twist. What we actually do know, and what I really want women to get, is you have to lean into daring to be who you are. And when you do, you will dare to do. Instead of daring to do performance related in hopes that we will finally feel all of our power connected to our purpose, we actually today, right now, have everything we need to uncover our purpose, recover our power, and discover our destiny. Daring to be. So if you can go to the next slide, I want to share a couple quotes. You know, the hero's journey was sort of was codified by the great mythologist Joseph Campbell, who wrote the wonderful seminal work, The Man with 1,000 Faces. Interestingly, he taught at a women's college for 30 years at Sarah Lawrence. And even though we think of the hero's journey as we think of sort of, you know, that master of all men out there slaying dragons, he actually spoke a lot about women. And after he died, someone put together everything he said about women in a book called Goddesses, Mysteries of the Feminine Divine. And here's an excerpt of what he said. Now, remember, he was writing this 50 years ago. Everything is changing, even the laws of the masculine jungle. We're in a period of free fall into the future, and each has to make his or her own way. He went on to say that it's even in the shaping of our interesting lives that we are creating the myths of tomorrow. And then he finished with this line: we are the ancestors of an age to come, the unwitting generators of its supporting myths, the mythic models that will inspire its lives. That's a heroine's journey. And a woman who once did the Decade Game sent me this picture that is here on the right, which I love. And it says, anyone can slay a dragon, she told me, but try waking up every morning and loving the world all over again. That's what makes a real hero. So I really love that. So what I want to do today is sort of unpack this idea of daring to do and daring to be. Let me just back up and just give you a little bit of history so you know where I'm coming from. I think that all of you, that there was probably a time you can remember, most likely as a little girl, sometime before puberty, where you realized that there was a purpose greater than yourself, something that was calling you to be a heroine in your own story. For me, it was 1960. I was 8 years old. We were in the middle of a Cold War. I remember doing duck and cover drills under my desk. I was very influenced by my mother. My mother was one of only 2 women in her law school class, University of Chicago, in the 40s. And she was championing sort of every Johnson Great Society program in upstate New York. Things that you at United we would be familiar about: the war on poverty, the crusade for opportunity, always supporting women and families in underserved environments. So I had my mother, and then John F. Kennedy, who said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And there he was, creating the Peace Corps, saying we could go to the moon, telling us to go exercise and get back in touch with our bodies. And I was like, reporting for duty, sir. I was ready. So that's when I realized I moved from being a little girl, totally self-absorbed in my own world, to realizing there was a bigger world out there. And I knew I wanted to play a part. And I knew that I needed to build a plan, a story, a way forward. And it required me to imagine who I would be, to play make-believe for real, to believe I could be the heroine of my own story, and then take responsibility to make it happen. So professionally, so as far as I could think was 10 years. I was 8. I could think, okay, freedom happens at 18 when I go away to college. I ended up studying Russian. My first job was a diplomat in the Soviet Union in the mid-70s, talking to 10,000 Soviet citizens every day about life in America. I went on to be an international banker, a Wall Street banker, a management consultant, a professor, all sorts of things. But throughout that entire career, I really felt that my real job was to sort of be an urban guerrilla, sort of stirring the pot for women in historically underrepresented groups. And I also have been a wife, a widow, a mother, a grandmother. Because whether you have children or not, we have a special role We are the ancestors of an age to come. We are the birthers, we are the nurturers, and we are the mourners. So when I talk about heroine in my own story, I'm talking about in all aspects of my life. But here's the thing. We can't do it the way the old story tells us to do it, which puts us into archetypes of the femme fatale, the damsel in distress, the seductress, the saint, the martyr, all sorts of old stories that have character flaws. All of those old stories, those old myths, those old fairy tales were written by men about women, and they reflect more men's hopes, desires, anxieties, and fears about women. They are not our stories. So, time to get the story straight. The way we're going to do that is I'm going to share with you some new epic rules of the game. I've got a whole bunch of them in the way I play the decade game. But I'm going to share a few of them so that we can turn those rules on their head and play a game that's our game to play. So you can go to the next slide, Robin. So here's one of my rules. If you are anxious, nervous, afraid, resigned, exhausted, pissed off, or just plain meh, chances are you are playing someone else's game. So if you are not having fun, you are playing someone else's game. So how do you get over that? The first thing is, well, first let me see a show of hands, or if you don't want to go on camera, you can put in chat. If you raise your hand, if you were raised to be a good girl, or put into chat the word yes, so I can sort of get a sense of where all you are. Okay, I see a lot of hands up. And okay, 100%, 100%. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Join the crowd. We all were, no matter where I've been in the world, literally, no matter where I've been, when I ask this question, everyone's hands go up. When I ask a follow-on question, who here is like super ambitious? I'm not sure whether people are raising their hand or fixing their hair. You know, there's sort of like that, yeah, well, let me see what everyone else is doing. Okay, that's totally good girl behavior. And you can see on the list all the things that good girls should do or shouldn't do. Put into chat, what's a good girl story in your head that keeps you from being as powerful as possible? So let's see, what are some of the good girl stories that hang in your head that keep you from doing everything you want? Okay, thank you, Dawn. Don't offend anyone. Don't outshine anyone. Be humble. Don't make waves. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. There are a lot of good girls here. I totally get it. Okay. So let me tell you the problem. When good girls act bad, meaning when they decide to try to exercise their power on purpose, for a purpose, they meet another character. You can go to the next slide, Robin. It's Goldilocks. Remember that story? Little girl goes rogue, runs off into the woods, finds the three bears' house, messes with all their stuff, and is blamed for everything. She's to this or to that, but never just right. So I want to know who has been to'd. But you've been told you've been to this or to that, not enough, too much, and put into chat a to story. So I'm just looking at Shara. You weren't raised to be a good girl, but you were told not to be too bossy. Okay, so you were to'd. That's the thing. Anytime we go outside of that good girl persona, we get to'd. Okay, lots of too sweet, too optimistic, too sensitive, too opinionated, too this, too that. Totally. So if you go to the next slide, what I want to share with you is this tension between good girl and Goldilocks creates leaking power. We are all leaking power. And here's what I want you to know. We are all guilty and none of us are to blame. We didn't make those stories. Those are myths. But they keep us contained, compressed. There have been thousands of women now who've done the decade game. And I tried to create some themes of this power leaking. And some people leak power because the primal story for them is that they're not enough. Others leak power because they're told they're too much. Both are two sides of the same coin. And they create behaviors, actions, and survival skills that have us leak power. So for example, I was on the too much side. What was my survival skill? Get the A, no matter what. Produce, 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 produce. That's how I was loved, at a cost, at a cost. Or, and I've seen it in some of your chats, dim my light. Don't be too bright. It makes other people uncomfortable. You need to make sure they feel comfortable. Don't shine too brightly, to men or women. And then there's sort of the classic imposter syndrome, which is inside you don't feel you belong, you believe you should be in the room, or you know you should be in the room and no one else thinks you should be in the room. And then they're down on the, if you tend to have more of a tension of I'm not enough, you see some of these beliefs that I really have to comfort others. That's the real job. That's how I will be loved. Or it's not safe. And when I say that we're all guilty and no one's to blame, it's because we created these stories for ourselves, because that was our interpretation of how we're liked, how we're loved, and how we're safe. But they are all actually fiction. It turns out that human beings are epic storytellers. We, as a species, have fictive language. That's why we survived when all the other Homo species, Neanderthal, Erectus, etc., didn't. We had fictive language, meaning we were able to use our imagination and put words on that story that wasn't actually real. That's cool. Epic storytellers, it's what's created our culture. Except we need some new stories. We need to be able to build a life based on a true story. So if you go to the next slide, here's another rule. Create a life by design, not default. So instead of defaulting to all these old stories that have us leaking power, learn how to be an epic storyteller so that you can really practice make-believe. If you can believe it, you can make it happen. And you can live a life of daring to do and daring to be. Now, I'm going to give you an opportunity to tell an epic story about yourself. One of the tools in the decade game is we play a game of Mad Libs. Raise your hand or give me a check mark if you remember that game, Mad Libs. All right, where you get a story, some things are blank, and they tell you, okay, put an adjective in here, put a noun in here. And when you do, you end up with a much better story. So we're going to play a Mad Lib. You can go to the next slide. So here's how it goes. When I play a decade game, I actually start with articulating my purpose. We don't have time to do that here, but what I will tell you is you all have one. And interestingly enough, it's the most important question of your life. Why am I here? And it's the one that's the hardest to answer. But there's a whole way of doing that. We don't have time to do that now. However, the object of the decade game is to imagine how you will know yourself and be known by the people who love you, your family, and the people who count on you, your community, society, the world, how you will be known 10 years from now as a result of daring to do and daring to be every day for 10 years. And so all you have to do is answer this question. Wouldn't it be cool if a decade from now, I knew myself, was known by the people who love me and the people who count on me as, and you just have to pick an exciting adjective, a powerful subject, a dynamic verb, a targeted object, and an epic outcome. So for example, here's my, this was my decade destination at 60 when I was 50. Now that was a while ago because I'm 70 now and I already have a game for 80. And I had a different game, 60 to 70. But based on my sense of what the average age might be here, I wanted to share my 50 to 60 game. So at 50, I was a partner at Ernst & Young. I was building a global billion-dollar business for them. And I knew I had mandatory retirement at my firm at 60. At 60, I did not want to be known as a retired partner of an accounting firm because that was not who I was. And so I built a destination, a Mad Lib, that at 60, I'd be known as a sought-after consigliere, encouraging leaders to use power with honor. So that became my decade destination. Now, you're going to have all the time you need in the next 60 seconds to come up with yours. And if you go to the next slide, I'm giving you a cheat sheet. Here's an example of a bunch of iconic words. Now, the words have to be iconic because you're telling an epic story. Now, you can use any of these words, or you can come up with your own, but you need to be answering the question, wouldn't it be cool if a decade from now, I knew myself spiritually, the people who love me knew me this way, and the people who count on me knew me this way. So this is your inner work, your work with the people you love, and your work in the world. So all you need to do is come up with your Mad Lib. Now, if you go to the next slide, I'm going to come back to this slide in a second, but I'm just going to give you some examples of some previous decade gamers. And you can see the way they came up with their avatar. This beautiful heroine, superhero. So you can see they're telling an amazing story, not of what's probable, but what's epic. Okay, now go back to the other slide. And I told you you got 60 seconds. That's all you got. Don't overthink this. And I want to hear from everyone, including Wendy, Robin, all the United We people. Let's see it. Go back. Yeah, that's it. That's the slide I want. And then put it into chat. Cindy says she's not seeing the slide. Is anyone else having problems seeing the slide? Cindy, just make something up. Okay, Stephanie, you're the first in. Beloved warrior, inspiring communities to have voice. Great. You're setting the bar high. Let's see others. Gracious warrior, connecting communities with unconditional love. Beautiful. We have two warriors in the room. Come on, I want everyone to play. It's no fun when you don't play. inspiring aunt and great aunt, impacting her community in ways that empower others, beloved builder, super medicine woman, guiding communities to heal the generations, another warrior. Oh my goodness. These are great. These are great. Now, keep going. Now, just imagine if we were all showing up this way every day. The charismatic animal welfare warrior, the visionary builder, the dynamic friend, the world would change. It would change like that. So let's go to another rule. Go to the next slide. So I told you that you have to be able to create a life by design, not default. And part of it was being an epic storyteller. You go to the next slide, Robin, you can keep moving. Here's another important tool. Know that you are the CEO and the CIO of your life. CEO meaning Chief Experience Officer, and CIO, Chief Investment Officer. You are the Chief Investment Officer of your time, your trust, your talents, and your treasures. And the way you play the decade game is take responsibility for your time, your trust, your talents, and your treasures to make sure you are investing in the right experiences and relationships that allow you to grow in mastery, in recognition, and ambition in order to be able to meet that decade destination. Now, I'm going to give you one of the key things about the decade game. Write down this word, this number, 87,600. Write it down, 87,600. There's 87,600 hours in a decade. Now, if you sleep 8 hours a night, and at 70, I will tell you, that's a good thing. That leaves over 50,000 hours. Who knows how many hours it takes to become a world expert? Put that into chat. Who knows how many hours? 10,000, right, Sherry? So you can become a world expert in five areas and still sleep 8 hours a night in 10 years. You see, we dramatically overestimate what we can get done in a year and dramatically underestimate what can be accomplished in 10. Think about who you were 10 years ago. Think about how much the world has changed in 10 years. Every cell in your body changes every 7. So we are talking about saying yes to total transformation. And we have a lot to transform, all those old stories. So imagine as you think about all of these beautiful words in chat, about all of you superheroes, what it would be like if every day, and then 50,000 hours, each of you, multiply that by all the people in United We, times 50,000 hours, you're talking about major change in the world. So I want to go to one more rule that I find helpful. And go to the next slide. It's hard to be epic. The game is rigged. We fight it every day. And by the way, you can't do it by yourself. This is why it's so important to have organizations like United We, where we can do it together. But here's a rule that I find very helpful. First of all, the decade game is not played in the future. Even though we're imagining, we play it today. We bring back into the present the innovative architect or the courageous warrior or the radiant builder or the charismatic connector. We bring that character, that avatar, that persona into everyday decisions. And this is this rule: practice thoughtful wishing instead of wishful thinking. Wishful thinking keeps us in the past, all that good girl stuff. I wish I had, if only I had, if only I hadn't. Or it puts us in the future, wishing for a better world, but not willing to take any action. Thoughtful wishing allows us to want what we have, do what we can, and be who we are today, knowing that we have the power of the universe inside us and that we actually have everything we need, resource rich or resource poor, to every day discover meaning for ourselves and create meaning for someone else. And that's epic. And here's the difference. Unlike wishful thinking, thoughtful wishing comes true. Now I'm going to do one more fun exercise because I know we get stuck. We get stuck in those old stories. So here's the exercise. And you go to the next slide. Everyone's got to play. So what I do when I'm stuck, and there are many times I get stuck, is I shut my eyes and find my epic. I pick an adjective that starts with E, an adjective that starts with P, an adjective that starts with I, and an adjective that starts with C that reminds me of the energy I'm in when I am in flow, when I am centered to my essential self, when I am feeling my power, knowing I am on purpose for a purpose greater than myself. So for me, my epic is empathetic, passionate, innovative, and courageous. If I'm stuck, if I'm doubting myself, if I'm scared, I shut my eyes and I go, okay, Carolyn, empathetic, passionate, innovative, courageous. From that place, I know I will make a better decision. Because in the decade game, there is no wrong move. There's only the next best move, a move taken from a foundation of power and purpose. So I want to meet your epic. Again, you have all the time you need in 60 seconds. Put into chat an E, a P, an I, and a C that represent you when you are in your power, that people can feel it. Thank you, Robin. Empathy, purpose, inspired, and courage. Great. Look at all of these. Exalted. Oh, that's a good one. Exalted, powerful, illuminated, courageous. Right. These are beautiful. Emboldened, passionate, intentional. So here's the thing. You hold both of these. You hold epic, which is right here, right now. And you're inspired by that 10-year destination. And that's the secret to creating the best decade of your life so far. So let's talk. Over to you, Wendy.
Carolyn, thank you. I mean, epic presentation, and we just couldn't get enough. I mean, of course, we are running out of time, but we have a few questions and we want to pull Laura into the conversation as well. So again, thank you for that overview. So Carolyn, I'm going to start with you. Question number one, what do you see as the major design challenges that women need to make to live into their epic?
Well, probably the most important thing I've found is women have a hard time thinking 10 years. You know, we are so busy with all, you know, doing so much for so many that it's hard to think beyond 10 minutes. And maybe we think a year, but we don't actually realize the spaciousness of knowing that we have 10 years to be able to really grow into something. And so people are not, they don't create the biggest, boldest possible vision because they think that the future is going to look like the past, but it won't. So I would say that. And then the other thing is we tend to try to be perfect.
Mm.
And we keep our fears and our doubts to ourselves. Women cannot do this work by yourself. You have to do it with a group of women who are willing to see your power, stand for your ambition, stand for your beauty, and stop the game of judgment, comparing, contrasting, all that stuff that actually keeps us separated from each other.
I love that. And I would just add too, I think women undervalue their experiences and their expertise, that humility, that, understate, we really push it down. So
We do. And I'll tell you another thing. How many people were told not to be so self-centered?
mhm.
Like, what's that about? You have to self-center. You have to be able to fully appreciate and love your epicness.
Said. So Laura, a question for you. As Carolyn mentioned, all women want to empower others, but are ambivalent about being as powerful as possible themselves. Working with Carolyn and the Decade Game, what have you learned about uncovering your purpose, recovering your power, and discovering your destiny? And can you give us an example?
I would like to start with recovering my power, because that for me was front and center with the game. In fact, it's interesting because I was looking at my game book last night and spending some time there, and I loved it. And I had this start, and it said, "It is not about climbing to the top. It is about getting to the center." And that really spoke to me, because I had been married or been with my husband since I was 22, and I was 56 when he passed away. And so I had no idea who I was in this new place in life as a single woman. And I had no idea how much I had relied on his power all those years. And even though I accomplished a lot, I did a lot with many other people, creating things, it was that inner power that I realized I was missing, and it was gone because I had given it to him. And so what happened to me was I had to go back and really spend time. The game has these different pillars, which are very amazing experience. It truly is a game. It is a game. And in these pillars, one of them is self. And I had to go back and spend a lot of time on undoing things. Where did I, societally, familially, among my peers, give up my power, especially for men? And I could look back and look at all these decisions I made that gave up that power to make the man that was president of the board look good, or make this happen, or make that. And I had to undo a lot of that and really see where it came from in my own life, from my family, or just from what's out there for all of us as women. And so that was really something that I moved through. And then the other thing that I worked on was I really worked on how do I really capture and define my skill sets? What brought me to where I am now? I mean, I knew basic skill sets. I knew who I was. I knew where I could contribute and be a part of a team to make something happen, but really go much deeper into that and look at it. And what I realized was I'm a weaver. I know how to take causes and issues and bring people together, and then create events to bring that to light for that others can see, for the community, etc. But I never defined myself as a weaver, a true weaver. And that was very powerful for me. And so, I started looking at what's next for me? What really is my next ideation of my life? What do I want to be at 70? I started this at 60. What do I want to be at 70? I never dreamed that kind of big. I don't know about you all, but I have never dreamed that far ahead. And I really became thoughtful in it. And I started using healing from the personal situations that happened, the personal revelations that I had to go through, and healing. And then I went into a place of what do I want to be moving forward. And so I'd like to share a little bit of my stand is I stand for a world where all voices are heard. And my destination is a radiant weaver that creates conditions for leaders and seekers to come together for transformative experiences that support the healing of the planet. And so that is what my destination is in 10 years. And so I've looked at all these different pillars that are part of the game and said, what is a 10 in all those? What is a 10 for me? When I'm standing there at 70 and I look back, and then it helps me create the pathway of all the little small things I have to do that lead me up to that big thing. So an example of how that's come into play is through this process of going into the pillar of self. I've realized that I believe that what keeps us individually and collectively stuck, and especially women, is we have to go in and do our own inner healing, because we can't collectively create the change we want to change, make happen if we're not healed within ourselves. And so I really have spent a lot of time doing that kind of work. So now I'm sitting on a transformative board. We have 62 acres. It's a wonderful center in upstate New York. And I am developing women's workshops on how we can come together as women and sit together and ask these tough questions in a safe space and help each other heal, and then help reweave to where we can build new ways of being when we go out into the world, because that's what I believe is going to help heal the planet.
Well said, Laura. Oh, it's so exciting. And it's great. We are a testament of your weaving. You introduced us to Carolyn and help us put this event together. So this is truly put into action exactly what you set out to do. So thank you.
If I can actually just add a few things. What's interesting, I told you that you all have a purpose. And Laura, you used to be a singer.
Years ago.
So yeah, but the fact that your purpose is all voices are heard, it's been with you all your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it started with your voice. Yeah. And then you lost your voice. So, there are these beautiful threads of a story that are with us all along. And the other thing I would just say, Laura, as you talk about, share your story, is when I say women can't do it alone, is we actually are all healing from themes and variations of the same wounds. Mm-hmm. So when we can see our tears in each other's eyes, share these stories, we heal faster.
Well said. Well said. Carolyn, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I have a question to you, Wendy, which is, you have, you're building an important organization of women helping women help the world. I'm thinking about, what's the organizational construct of the decade game for United We? For example, my husband and I, our marriage, we have a decade game for the two of us, for the marriage. The marriage is different than each of us. But I'm curious about if you were imagining how you will be known, meaning United We, a decade from now, what would you say?
Well, it's a big question, but there's two things. One, using your voice is really important for our organization, and we utilize our voice organizationally to really impact systemic change for women and their families. But we in our name is critical, and the vision is it's all of us, women's empowerment, but it's everyone, women and men, and whatever you celebrate in your life, it's coming together to lift up and support women. And so the vision in the next 10 years is that we have come together more to support women. And the world looks a little different with that support system in place between women and men, and using the voice to collectively lift up and support women and their families economically and civically. That's the vision. But thank you. It's a great question, but a big one, and a big question to answer. Carolyn, a question for you. So what inspired you to write Epic and develop the Decade Game? And tell us how this all started.
Well, I've been playing this game myself since I've been 8, allowing me to, continue to reimagine my life. So it was just sort of intuitive to me. But in my Decade Game, I shared with you what my decade destination was at 60, that at the minute I retired from the partnership of EY, but then I created a new game for myself, 60 to 70, where I knew I wouldn't be part of a large organization. So I created a new job for myself. And again, the job is that decade destination. And once you've got it, you're never out of a job. You just might be temporarily out of a product or a project, which allows for a lot of experimentation. Well, let me try this, or let me try this. So at 60, I created a game for myself at 70, which is that wouldn't it be cool if I knew myself and was known by the people who love me and count on me as an organizational shaman, inspiring humans to live epic lives. Now, the challenge was I'd never met a shaman. So I wasn't really sure about what I was talking about, but I did have this sense that that decade, 60 to 70, was an opportunity for me to change my relationship with ambition, to move from being the warrior and the rock star, to begin the process of becoming an elder, and that there was an awful lot I needed to learn and experiment. So to give you sort of an example of how the game works, a week after I retired, I got remarried. I was also a widow at the same age Laura was. So I got remarried, and instead of going to a beach in Fiji for our honeymoon, I thought, well, what would the organizational shaman inspiring humans to live epic lives, what would she do? She would not go to a beach. So we climbed Kilimanjaro for our honeymoon, because I thought, well, I bet you that's what a shaman would do. And actually, that's where I really got the insight that it's not about getting to the top, it's getting to the center, because you cannot get to the top of Kilimanjaro, 19,000 feet, just because you are pushing your body. You have to go so deep to be able to do that. And I had set one of my commitments in terms of, Laura talked about her 10, because it's like a video game. You buy a video game for the epic quest, but you play it at the level you're in, and you never know why you open a door, say hello to a stranger, pick up a tool. You just know it'll be useful to you. But I had set a epic quest for myself that would be age appropriate as an elder, to document what I knew, because what I knew isn't coming from me. It's coming from a much deeper place. The feminine energy in the world is rising. And we are coming of age at a time when we are absorbing the wounded masculine energy in the world and the distorted feminine energy in the world that has come from thousands of years of everyone playing a suboptimal human game. So I had a level 10 epic quest to make sure that by the time I turned 70, I would document what I knew in a way that was accessible to others. So 3 weeks before I turned 70, I published Epic.
Congratulations. What a great story. And way to put a marriage to the test right out of the gate.
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, my husband wasn't, my husband said he had never seen a shade of green on any human the way he saw a shade of green on me when we were trying to get to the summit.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Laura, a question for you. As a philanthropist, you've already shared a little bit about some of the things that you're working on, but can you share how this process has helped you empower other women and take action on issues you care about most?
It speaks to what Carolyn just said, actually, is that I feel strongly that, we're living in a wounded world. And I think the masculine's tired, actually. You can see them grasping, grasping for the power, grasping. And I feel I'm putting my money and energy where this calling is, that I feel it's very important that we create environments for women to heal. And because then philanthropy will be healthy.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of dysfunction there that we can discuss, and won't, but we could. So collaboration, cooperation, working together and really leading in with love. I think at the core of it, it comes down to love of self, love for each other. Then when we do all that healing, imagine what we could do, and I think we have an opportunity to move into the next place. So I have put a lot of my energy and commitment, because then I know I am serving philanthropy when I can. And I also believe strongly in serving girls. And I'm working on some projects around girls and helping them, because we don't teach this. And the younger we can start catching these young women and teaching them about this, the more powerful, because they're the next generation coming in. So I really want to create those environments for that kind of work. And then I know I'm doing the highest form of philanthropy and for my calling.
Oh,
Laura, I love that you presence the word love. I've been doing a lot of conversation at companies for Women's History Month, and someone asked me, what do I think the most important thing for a leader is? And my answer was, a leader needs to bring love into the room.
Mm-hmm.
Full stop.
It's great. Well said. Well, it's time now to turn this to you and engage you in the conversation. And we welcome questions for Carolyn, for Laura. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions. If you feel more comfortable dropping your question in the chat, please do so now. We want to hear from you. And I know you have questions. So please, who would like to be our first one? Laura, where can I connect with you? I think there's someone who would like to connect with you in the chat.
Wonderful. I am open to be supportive however I can. And so I'll give you my email. How's that? Laura Welch, LauraWelch @me.com. And I'll put that in the chat as well.
I have a question for Carolyn. I am curious, a decade feels like a long time when it comes to visioning and planning. Are there tips or techniques for when your vision or your plan ends up taking like a way different turn than you intended?
Yeah. Well, first of all, Stephanie, thank you for the question. The decade game is not a plan. It's a game, meaning there aren't like, I have to do this by then with lists and to-dos and metrics and goals, because, we all know how that works out. Instead, it's much more about trusting the universe and trusting your dreams. So that's why it's sort of like writing the victory speech 10 years from now. I have people start the game by actually writing an 800 to 1,000 word journal entry dated 10 years in the future about the most amazing day you just had. Personally, professionally, philanthropically, all the things that made it the most amazing day. Not everything had to happen on that day, but in this journal entry, you reflect back, wow, this happened. Isn't it amazing? If 5 years ago, I hadn't said yes to X, or who would have thought 10 years ago this was possible? But I'm now remembering, wasn't it amazing that, in 7 years ago, something showed up and I decided, even counter to all intuition, that this seemed to be the right thing. So by reflecting on possible milestones that got you to that future, creates a frame. Because here's the thing we know about our brain. The brain only knows what it knows, except if you can imagine and vision in specificity. One of my favorite quotes from Lily Tomlin, the comedian, is, I always knew I wanted to be someone. I just didn't know I had to be more specific. So when you are very, very specific in creating a compelling vision, your brain thinks you did it. It's as if you actually did it. So neural networks begin to start forming, and all of a sudden, something shows up and you have this intuition that that's a good thing to say yes to. So no plans, no metrics, no goals, no, oh my God, I didn't do it, I feel terrible. None of that. This is about getting concrete about what's longing to happen and what's a possible manifestation of it. This 1,000-word journal entry is a metaphor. It doesn't have to happen this way. Every decade, when I get to that decade destination, it's not like I want necessarily that thing. I'm just ready to make a new decade game. So I'll share with you my new decade game for 80, because it's the next decade could be the best decade yet. 10 years from now, you heard it here first, you will know me and I will know myself as an intergenerational restorier, naming the dances that are longing to happen.
Love it.
So one of my rules is you cannot get there from here, but you can get here from there. You create that big, bold idea, and then you bring a little bit of that star stuff of the amazing warrior or the radiant weaver or the medicine woman into it today and say, what would she do here? And you will begin to start living differently. You will begin to experience more daring do and daring to be.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Deb Macon from Michigan dropped a question in the chat, but Deb, I'll call on you. You may want to just ask your question. And you are on mute.
Oh, thank you. So sorry. Carolyn, how do we get our hands on the decades game? Is it in your book?
It is epic. Epic is part memoir, part manual, and part manifesto. In it, and it's also now out on audio. So you can, you buy it on any platform, or you can buy the audio on any platform. It takes you through how to play the game, lots of stories of who's played it. And you should love it.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Stephanie, you have your hand raised. Stephanie Coleman, would you like to ask your question?
Yep. So you started out this conversation, Carolyn, and this could go to Laura or Carolyn, the question, but we started out talking about being raised to be a good girl. And then we're talking about empowerment and power and all this kind of stuff within us. How has, or have you ever, I'm sure you have, those individuals that say, oh, the audacity of her to act this way, or, so highly of herself. How do you get through that?
Yeah. So it's a great question because, I've been the only woman in so many organizations, at a leadership level, and I've been tooed way too many times. Here's here would be one of the ways that I deal with it. I put on my hat as a cultural anthropologist and know that what I'm getting is feedback of the existing culture, whether it's the family culture, the organizational culture, the team culture. And then I like to ask a follow-up question. When you feel that I am that way, how does that impact our work together? Because then you're beginning to understand where someone else feels uncomfortable. And you're not making an apology for who you are, but you are making it about we, about us. When you perceive me this way, how does that get in the way of our work together? And instead of taking it personally, which I find women do, it's not about you.
Right.
It's telling you about the current state of the status quo. One of my rules is honor the resistance, because resistance is what happens when what's longing to happen meets the status quo. But I know that healing is longing to happen. I know that collaboration is longing to happen. I know that community is longing to happen. So to recognize that resistance is the natural tension of when what's longing to happen meets the status quo. I complete that rule by saying an old Star Wars quote, resistance is futile. Because here's what your real job is. All of you, whether it's at home, at work, or in the world, to be the leader you want to be, you need to learn how to be skilled in creating change, in shape shifting. So when I hit resistance, I'm like, perfect. Now I have a chance to understand where the status quo is and what are the levers in to change it. And the only way you do that is make the circle bigger. We are both in the circle. What's keeping us from being more effective together?
Or anything you would like to add?
Yeah, you know, the word that comes always to me is when I face that and hit that up against that is the word compassion, because they don't know. It's like, it's what speaks to what Carolyn just said, but it allows me to stay in a place of an open heart so that I don't go into anger. I can have more understanding of where they are, because I actually used to be there on a lot of these things.
Yeah.
So that's to me the beginning of being able to create the change.
And Laura, what I would say is, compassion is another way of saying act from your epic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the ability to meet that with compassion and insight, it's a spiritual practice.
It is.
And for us to be the Shambhala warriors of the future, it means that we need to our weapons are insight and compassion.
Yeah, great. We have time for one more question, and this is from Rebecca. And Rebecca asks suggestions on how we can work to find a place of loving acceptance when our unique gifts and contributions are not valued by the system. Yeah, it's a good question.
Well, let me just say, transformation is an inside job. You've got to find it yourself. Part of the part of the pushback is most people don't feel special. They don't know, they don't have their own self-love, and it creates a vicious cycle. So bring love into the room, but start with loving yourself. That's a good way.
That's great. Anything you would like to add, Laura?
Well said. I mean, I think that is it, that self-love, and also looking at, where did that catch you and why? Because then when you get to that answer, then it's a tool, because you'll go, oh, something happened to me at the age of 13 that created that kind of energy. And then you own that and know, oh, but that's okay. I'm this now. And this is who I am now. And so when you go into the next opportunity of growth, when somebody presents something like that, you go, no, that is not the truth. I am a power. I have things to give, and this is who I am and how I will show up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you both. We could keep going. There was lots of questions in the chat. Oh, I love that. Carolyn, we, in true fashion for Women's History Month, we have a couple of giveaways here. And first, we'd like to thank Laura, who is a generous philanthropist and has donated 10 of Carolyn's epic books to give away to the group today. And we are announcing the winners in the chat. So those are going to appear here before your very eyes. And you can see the names in the chat, and we will be sure and get those to you. It's a great read, as you can well imagine. And if you, again, feel free to purchase the book or listen. It's been an Audible read. So when you're doing things, it's a great tool. Next, Carolyn is giving away 5 30-minute professional coaching sessions. And I have the honor of announcing who the 5 are to work with Carolyn for 30 minutes. What a special gift for Women's History Month. Jackie Edison, Perrin Duncan, Mary Barnes, Marie Dispenza, and Deb Bacon. You get to spend some quality time with Carolyn and be looking for an email from us with additional details. So again, thank you so much, Carolyn and Laura, for joining us today, for sharing your wisdom. This has just been truly an inspirational day for us.
And also, I'd love to add about Carolyn's wonderful workshop that she has going, coming up. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Wendy.
Nope. Yes. So,
but do you want to go ahead and talk about it? I wasn't for sure if it was.
Sure. Yes. So Carolyn also shared with us a last minute opportunity to say yes to Epic Spring Break with her as lead at Mastery Week at the Modern Elder Academy in Baja, Mexico, April 3rd through the 8th. So an epic spring break, I can't imagine a better way to spend time working on this. There are a few spots left, and the MIA is offering a 20% discount to the lucky women who sign up by March 15th. Please see the link in the chat for more information about this amazing spring break opportunity. Wow. In closing, again, I want to thank Carolyn and Laura for joining us and inspiring us to lead. Thank you again for everyone for joining us today, especially our ambassadors, trailblazers, and change makers. And if you are not in the United We Network, I encourage you to get involved, become an ambassador, a donor, or join the Appointments Project. I think we're going to put up a link on a slide here for you to find out more information. And then also, I'd like to ask for you to mark your calendars for 2 signature events that United We is hosting coming up. Our Champion Breakfast is on Friday, April 28th. It's in person and a virtual opportunity as well. And then our We Work for Change event, September 26th at the Kaufman Center for Performing Arts, again, in person and a virtual opportunity. So wherever you are, you can join us. We have recorded today's session. So if you didn't get enough or want to go back and listen again, we'll be posting that and sharing that with you, some good information that we recorded today. And thank you again for joining us as we celebrate Women's History Month and the legacy of women. We hope you have a great rest of Women's History Month and have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.